Hello, my name is Sterling Edwards, and today I'd like to show you the main secrets of painting abstract scenes with watercolor. I've been painting in various genres and mediums for many years, but there's one direction that gives me the maximum freedom of self-expression. Watch the video until the very end. There's a lot of good things I'm going to show you. Thank you. Now let's start with some of this cadmium yellow, this very wet fluid cadmium yellow. I'm going right along the bottom of my painting. I'm using this a 2-inch, very stiff hog bristle brush. It holds a lot of water and a lot of paint. I'm taking that yellow, I'm taking it right up into my sky just a little bit. All right, now I'm going to come into my permanent yellow. So using the same brush, come in right here like this. And I can kind of brush it down into my cadmium yellow. So I get these nice variations of yellow. Some are darker, some are lighter. Now I'm doing this quickly because I want to get this in before it dries. Now I'm taking my quinacridone scarlet. I'm putting it right in the middle, right in here. Now you'll notice if I take that scarlet and move it down into these yellows, I get these beautiful sunset orange colors. I can also, I'm sometimes wiping my brush off. I can also take that quinacridone scarlet and I can move it up into the sky up here. And just keep brushing it around so it gets nice and blended in. Now I can come in and put in my violet right up here, and the violet's going to blend with this, but this right here is my buffer. That will keep the violet away from my yellows. So here's my violet. That's permanent violet. Let's get some more of it. And so I can brush that right down into that quinacridone scarlet. I can always a little bit more scarlet if I want to. So I'm at the point right now I can keep adding more color if I choose to, because what I have is a nice clean variation of colors, and there's no green and there's no mud. That's kind of what I want. Now let's take some more of that scarlet and put a little bit right over here. Now I can come into my Prussian blue. This is my very fluid Prussian blue. I'm coming right at the top. I'm gonna let that Prussian blue kind of work down into my violets. We're getting just a very nice glowing sunset. Now we're not through with it. We're going to do more on it. But before I do anything else, I want to get some trees on the horizon. So let's let that sit for a second. This is all still wet. Let's get some burnt sienna. I'm getting some Hooker's green. I'm getting most of the water out of my brush. I want a much thicker paint now. Now, if I run my finger through that, you see it leaves a track. There's less water in this. So I got the excess water out of my brush, and I got the excess water out of my paint. And now I have much more opportunity to come in if I choose to and start putting in a few suggestions of foreground trees and just a canopy of trees, more or less, using that same big stiff bristle brush. And as I get over in this area, I'm going to start putting some orange in it. This is my brilliant orange, and a little bit of burnt sienna. Kind of dropping that in. Now I'm just going back and forth between my greens, my burnt siennas, my orange colors. Make it look like it's just like the sun is just going down behind the trees. Everything's nice and illuminated. Now while we're at it, let's also take some of that color and color in the foreground using that same big brush. Everything's been done with one brush. If you want to improve your painting skills, it's essential to continually refine your abilities. It's also very important to do this under the guidance of a master you trust. Recently, I've conducted many online lessons with my students, and I can recommend a workshop that will suit everyone. Follow the link below in the video description and register for free. I'm sharing my exclusive tips and giving all the necessary knowledge, so join me. Together, we're going to work on a masterpiece. Thank you. I'm going to put a little bit of violet in this. So I have violet and burnt sienna and just a little bit of my Hooker's green. We put a few darker trees in here now. We're getting this nice variation of color. And that's really what I want. I'm just trying to give the viewer just enough information. They look at this and they see definitely a field of grass or a marshy area or something, and they see lots of trees in the distance. And it's all being done on wet paper. Look at that sky drying back with a nice glow to it. Now we're going to come back on that sky in just a second after I dry the paper. We're going to do some more work on it. But in the meantime, let's get some more color down here in the foreground. This is a relatively simple piece to paint. The entire purpose of this painting is to show you how to paint a nice, clean, vibrant sunset without getting a lot of mud. But it's also an opportunity to show how to paint some foreground trees and things like that too. So it's turning into a landscape now. And that little bit of orange is so beautiful right in here. It almost looks like the sun went down right behind those trees. Now, like most of you, I used to paint sunsets that were very muddy. I either had a green sky or I had a very muddy sky until I found out about putting this area in the middle. It's a color that mixes well with everything. I mean, this quinacridone gold, or you could use permanent rose. There's a lot of different colors you can use, but the main thing is it's a color that blends well with the violet. It also blends well with the yellows, and it keeps these and these all separated. All this down in here is just icing on the cake, more or less. Now I'm making this foreground a little bit darker, and I'm doing that for a reason, which I'll show you very shortly. The darker I make this foreground, the more dramatic this painting is. Because when I frame my work, I always frame it in a white matte. And a white matte is beautiful if you put a lot of dark along the bottom of the painting. It just makes it pulls the eye in towards the light. So as long as this paper is still wet, let's keep adding a few more little nuances of color to it. Now we'll come back and do more on this in just a second too. So I'm at a point right now, this is where I stop and dry the paper. The paper's getting a little bit dry anyway. I know that because I'm getting a few areas of dry brush. That means the surface is drying. But rather than risk messing this painting up, I'm going to take a second and dry it. It'll only take a minute or two. And then we're going to come in and do some more work on the sky. So the sky right now already looks like a sunset. But we're going to crank it up a notch and make it even more dramatic and more pronounced. And then we'll come in and do some more work on this down in here. So now that I've got my painting blocked in, and that's really all this is just the block in. We're going to start working on the sky. So now I'm taking my my number 12 round brush. That's just a round nylon brush. We're going to take some more of this quinacridone scarlet and just a little bit of this permanent yellow. This makes a very, very rich, fiery orange. And I'm also going to have my little small bristle brush, the 1 inch. I've got it clean, and I have a tissue, and I'm squeezing the excess water out of that brush. What I'm going to do with this, I'm going to use this to blend and soften edges. So I want this brush to be just damp enough. It'll move the paint and soften an edge, but it's not putting a lot of water on the painting. So if I get it clean like I just did, I've always got a tissue in my hand. I squeeze the excess water out, and then I rub it on the back of my thumb. I want that brush to feel cool, and I want it to feel damp, but does not leave a shiny wet spot. If it leaves a shiny spot, it's too wet. Squeeze some more water out of it. So that's exactly where I want it. It's cool, it's damp, but you don't see a shiny wet spot. Let's get some of this pretty color we just mixed up and test this out a little bit and see how it looks. So now we're starting to really get some interesting things in this guy. I'm gonna come in and lose the top edge of that. See, I'm just kind of blending that out with that damp brush. Sunsets are so beautiful and everybody loves them. And there's so many different ways to paint them. This is a way that I have found really works. So I see I just come in, just soften a few edges here and there. Every time I soften an edge, I'm wiping that brush off. I picked up a little bit of color doing that, so keep it clean. And it's not always necessary to re-wet the brush every time, but if it starts getting too dry, just wet it again. Again, blot the water out of it. Now let's get some more of this magenta up in here. I'm putting a little bit of the violet with it. So it really does kind of accentuate all the beautiful clean colors we have above. And again, I'm being very careful not to put any yellow up in this area, because if I do, I'll wind up with a green color. So I can put the violet up in here as long as I have the magenta mixed with it. It works fine. But it really is a matter of just knowing what color to put where and how much to put. Now I'm going back down this area again. So again, I can come back in some more of this magenta. I keep calling it magenta. It's actually a quinacridone scarlet, but it's a magenta color. I'm putting some right back in here like this. And again, come in just soften just a little bit. We're getting a nice, interesting, fiery landscape now. Now I'm gonna use a bigger brush. This is my 1-inch flat. Let's get some more of that violet and a little bit of the quinacridone scarlet. Let's see if we can't just really get something big up here. This is my 1-inch flat brush. Squeeze it out. Now, I'm going to try something real brave here and see what happens. I'm going to take some of this permanent yellow, just a little bit, put it right along the edge of that. It gives this nice little glow to it. I'm keeping it out of that blue. I'm just putting it right, these layers of the quinacridone scarlet have just a little bit of a, it's kind of reflected orange coming off the ground, off the area below. And I can also take just a tiny bit of that violet and the quinacridone, put just a little bit right in here, just in a few places. All we're trying to do is just really kind of mix up these colors a little bit so you get this nice glowing sunset, and you see the same colors kind of echoed through the painting. Now let's get some more of that pretty yellow. This is the permanent yellow. Let's put just a little bit more right back in this area. That implies the sun's kind of gone down right in that area, right behind those trees, because this is the area that has the most intense glowing yellow. And again, come in very lightly. I'm not trying to scrub real hard. I don't want to scrub off my underpainting. I'm trying to scrub just enough that I get this nice, pretty glow to it without getting too heavy-handed. There's lots of wet areas up here. While that dries, let's go back and work on the trees. Now, one thing that's going to make this painting really work is to put some nice dark in this area. Because right now I've got mostly midtones here, and I've got midtones up there with a little bit of light in the middle. Let's see if we can't come in with a nice rich dark and put some dark up in this area where these trees are. Because these trees are essentially kind of backlit, the light's behind them. So I'm taking some of my Hooker's green, a little bit of violet, and some burnt sienna. I'm making a nice rich dark. And that's pretty heavy paint. There's my finger test. So there's not a lot of water in that. That's mostly just a little bit of heavy pigment. So let's come in right here and put a few little darks in this. And again, I can come in and soften that top edge. That shows the top of the grass and the bottom of the trees. Now, if I want to do a little negative shapes, I can do that. And this is a really great way to anchor your shapes down to the ground. Now the trees are definitely anchored to the ground. It looks like a little grove of trees out at the edge of a field. It has a lot of dimension to it. Take that little brush, this little barely damp brush, just kind of move that paint around a little bit. A paint like this, if you're in your studio just working by yourself and you want to do a piece that's about this size, you can easily do one of these in an hour or less, because it's not a really involved painting. And what's beautiful about these is they're something everybody loves. Everybody loves a sunset, and they're fun to paint. And every one you do is going to be different. No two ever turn out the same. It's just not meant to be. These are just too they're too fresh and too spontaneous. So now you can clearly see the top of the field. You can see the bottom of the trees. Let's take it one step further. I'm gonna get my larger brush. This is my 1-inch flat. We'll see if we can't come in and put just a little bit of definition down in this grassy area.
Sterling, what are the colors, the two colors that you just added, please?
Oh yes, this is burnt sienna, a little bit of my permanent violet, and a little bit of hooker's green. So I get this nice, it's a really nice, rich, dark, kind of a greenish brown almost. And because at this point we're looking to really add some pretty dark into our paintings, we need something that's pretty rich. Because the darker I make some of this, the more vibrant that sunset above it's going to look. So I'm always looking for ways to control my the colors. In fact, here I'm putting some quinacridone gold in this area right over here, just a little bit. So by adding these darks down below, it makes that look so much brighter. And that's 90% of what watercolor is. And anybody that's ever taken a class with me knows I'm a real stickler on putting dark in your paintings. You have to have the dark to make the light work. If everything is mid-tone and light, the painting looks very anemic and washed out. If you just put a few darks in a few places, look how much more dramatic that painting is. And it's kind of nerve-wracking at first. A lot of artists are very intimidated by the darks. They're afraid to go too dark. And quite frankly, my suggestion is you're better off to go too dark than not go dark enough. These darks are just making this whole thing kind of come together. Even in the foreground, I can take the same combination of colors as my violet, my burnt sienna, and my hooker's green, and I can come in and really darken this. Now we'll come in a few minutes after that dries, and we'll do something real fun and real dramatic to that area. And the darker it is, the better this technique will work. So let's put some more over here. And when I finish this piece, I'll put a white mat around it. And I want you to really pay attention to how that white mat looked with all these beautiful darks along the outside bottom edges and along the bottom. That white mat will just bring this piece alive. That's one thing I learned years ago. I've owned a couple of art galleries, and one thing I noticed was when you always want your painting to be dynamic. You want to be, by dynamic, I mean there's something about that painting when somebody walks in that gallery, they notice your painting. Even if they don't buy it, they notice it. That's 90% of being an artist, is getting our work noticed. And if you really get brave with the darks and leave some nice areas of light, your painting will get noticed. Because you can't walk in that room and not notice that painting. It's just so dynamic looking. So I'm just taking some more of these little darks, just kind of popping them here and there, not getting too carried away with it. Now you got this little ridge of ground, and you got the pretty trees, and everything's kind of working the way it should. And the darker I make the bottom of the trees, the more the top of the ground it becomes evident. But it took the dark to do that. So I put some color down, then I take this little bristle brush and just very lightly, with very little pressure. This brush is barely damp. I'm just kind of softening that top edge. You get this nice blended effect. Now this piece right in here, I think what I'm gonna do just for illustration, I've got my brush handle, got that little beveled end on it. I can put a few little suggestions of trees in here. Don't do too much of this. If you do too much, it almost looks kind of gimmicky. Do just enough that people see suggestions of trees. Now I'm gonna stop and dry this one more time. I want to dry this, and then we'll come back probably and do just a touch more up in here, but not a whole lot. We already have a nice vibrant sunset. What we're doing right now is we're just trying to find ways to make the foreground rich enough and dark enough and interesting enough that it's a beautiful setting for this. So we're not going to do a whole lot more up in the sky, but we will do some. And I might even put something over here if I feel it's necessary. I'm not using a photograph, so anything I do is pretty much impromptu. I just, whatever it needs, that's what I do. And this is the way I paint. Photographs for me are just, they give me an idea for a painting, but I'm not ever trying to copy the photograph. I'm using the photograph just as an inspiration. And then I say, okay, now what can I do using my techniques and my processes to take that inspiration and do something kind of unique and different with it. And that's kind of my philosophy towards painting. So give me 1 second to dry this right here. Now, before I turn the dryer on, are there any questions right now about what I've just done? So I'm gonna take my little small number 4 round. That's a number 4 round, just a very small little nylon brush. I've got some more of this pretty permanent yellow and quinacridone scarlet. I'm putting just a few little areas of movement in some of these clouds. And again, this is kind of thing you don't do too much. A little goes a long way. And this is just kind of adding a little bit of a extra window dressing on the cloud. That's all I'm trying to do. Have a little bit more color, a little bit more exciting shapes. One thing that's so beautiful about clouds this time of day is the sun's going down behind these trees, but the sun's shining up on the bottom of these clouds, and you get these wonderful, beautiful varieties of orange and yellow, and it just looks like it's on fire. And that's the look we're shooting for right now. Now we'll let that rest for a few minutes. I'm going to take my number 6 rigger. That's a very, very skinny little rigger brush. I've got this mix down here of violet and Payne's gray and Hooker's green. I'm taking that little rigger brush. I'm going to suggest there's a few little dead trees out here. And I do this for a reason. People like something they can really focus their eyes on, and these little tree trunks and things they just give they kind of complete the scene. And just like anything else, don't do too many of them. Just a few is all you need, but just a little tiny bit gives the viewer something they can kind of focus on. Even out here, there might be something right over here. I'm taking some, this is burnt sienna and violet, making it a little bit darker, so it's coming forward. So since it's more in the foreground, it's going to have a little bit more color intensity to it. And everything I do is designed, like I said, to make the piece more dramatic, make it more interesting, more entertaining for the viewer. I want people to look at that, just go, wow, what a beautiful sunset. Because it's something everybody can identify with. Everybody loves the sunset. This area right here, I made that real dark for a reason. I'm gonna lift off some texture down here. Now, one thing I like about the Fabriano Artistico paper, it's great for lifting color. It's a very forgiving paper. And even if you paint it real dark, like you see here, you can still lift off some color. So I'm taking my number 6 rigger, it's clean, and I've got some clear water on it, and I'm kind of shaking the excess off, and I'm holding the brush back at the back end, back here, and I'm gonna just tap the brush right along those dark areas. It's putting little tiny droplets of water. This can look like lots of weeds and grass. Let that set for a second. Take a tissue, blot it, blot the excess water off, and then ball that tissue up and wipe really hard. There's all kinds of little weeds and grassy textures. So let's do some more of it. Let's do some over here. And you can do as much of this as you want. I recommend don't do too much of it. Anything you do with watercolor, particularly, do it in moderation, because sometimes we find something that looks really great and we just keep doing more and more of it. And then before you know it, it almost becomes a gimmick. And it looks like you're getting desperate trying to dress up a bad painting. But just enough that it accomplishes what you want, which is giving me some foreground texture. But all you're really trying to do is give the viewer just a little suggestion of what's going on. You're not trying to just spell it all out for them. People will figure it out without us having to give them every little thing. A little spot of paint right there, get that on. Now, looking at this piece right now, it's just about a finished painting. I mean, it's a very simple composition, but it's just it's a painting of a sunset. So there's no sense getting real involved in it. Everybody knows what it is, and that's the main thing. So at this stage of the game, this is where I would usually just... I hope this video was helpful for you. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, where we assist all individuals in mastering the skills of drawing and immerse themselves in the wonderful world of art. Don't forget to follow the link in the video description and register for my marathon. We'll see you soon. Thank you.